years of this NDP Liberal government, it is clear the Prime Minister is not worth the cost of fuel. Most Canadian families will struggle just to be able to afford their yearly summer road trip. That's because his carbon tax has helped push the cost of fuel up to record highs. Now, Conservatives have called for a common sense plan to axe the carbon tax and all federal taxes from fuel from now until Labor Day. That would save about 35 cents a litre. Will the government adopt our common sense plan so Canadians can afford their summer road trip?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'm so glad that the Conservatives are raising questions about the cost of living and the lives of Canadians, because it gives me an opportunity to point out that inflation in April was 2.7%. That is the fourth month in a row that inflation has been within the Bank of Canada's target range. And for 15 months now, Mr. Speaker, wage increases have been outpacing inflation. That helps Canadians.
By what standard?
The Honourable Member from Regina Capel.
That's the Liberal message, that Canadians have never had it so good. The carbon tax is failing, except at driving up the cost of everything. Actually, the government is succeeding very, very well at driving up the cost of groceries, home heating, and, of course, fuel. The carbon tax is sending millions of Canadians to the food bank for the first time, and it's pushing the cost of simple things like driving to your favorite family vacation spot out of the reach of hardworking Canadians. While the Prime Minister gets to stick Canadian taxpayers with the bill for his exotic vacations, Canadians are struggling just to scrape enough to take their family on a trip. Why won't they adopt our plan and take the tax off of fuel for the summer?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would encourage my honourable friend to actually read the work that was done by 300 economists across this country, which says unequivocally that 8 out of 10 Canadian families get more money back in the rebate than they actually pay in the price on pollution. That is addressing affordability, and in fact, Premier Smith herself said she got more money back for her family than she paid. If he really is concerned about affordability, though, I would encourage him to go to talk to his friend Premier Smith, who just increased the gas price by 13 cents, and did so with no rebate and no accounting for affordability.
The Honourable Member from Lakeland.
After 9 years, Canadians can't afford the costly coalition's carbon tax, but this Prime Minister doesn't care. He'll quadruple it, even though 70% of Canadians and 7 out of 10 premiers told him to spike the hike. Now, Conservatives' common sense plan is to axe all federal taxes on gas until Labor Day to save Canadians 35 cents a litre. That's more than $955 of needed savings for Alberta families alone. Will the Prime Minister axe the tax on gas this summer so Canadians can afford the basics and maybe even a Canadian road trip staycation?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources and Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives' lack of common sense approach to these things is about axing the facts. Every reasonable observer, 300 economists across this country, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, are very clear. 8 out of 10 Canadian families get more money back, and it's those that live on modest incomes that actually do the best, all the while fighting climate change. If they have questions, I encourage them to go and talk to the Premier of their province of Alberta about the fact that she gets more money back than she actually pays. That is a responsible plan to address affordability and to fight climate change.
Forest fires are up this year. Floods are already up this year in some parts of the country. More than last year.
The Honourable Member from Lakeland.
Well, after 9 years, it's clear that everyone but these out-of-touch elite NDP Liberals knows the carbon tax isn't worth the cost. Page 4 of last year's Budget Officer report says, quote, maybe you should listen, taking into consideration fiscal and economic impacts, most households will see a net loss. The NDP Liberals' inflationary tax and spend agenda makes everything more expensive and hurts vulnerable Canadians. The most common sense Conservatives will axe the tax for all for good, but since fuel prices have surged over 50% under him, will the PM at least axe the tax off Canadian summer road trips?
The Honourable Minister for Energy and Natural Resources.
Mr. Speaker, it is very clear. 300 economists across this country agree. 8 out of 10 Canadians get more money back in the rebate. It is an approach that addresses affordability, does so in a manner that actually addresses climate change. Mr. Speaker, I would encourage my honourable honourable colleague across the way to talk to her premier, who has said it is a price on pollution that actually gives her family more money back, and she should go and have a conversation with Premier Smith, who just raised the price on gasoline by 13 cents with no rebate and no plan to address the climate crisis.
The honourable member from Central Okanagan, Similkameen, Nicola.
Mr. Speaker, our jet-setting Prime Minister has begun his summery luxury tour early, blowing through Philadelphia with his usual all-expenses-paid five-star hotels and all the food and alcohol his entourage can take. After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, most Canadians can hardly afford a summer road trip. Will he adopt our common-sense plan to put $682 in the pockets of British Columbians and give them a shot at a summer road trip, or is he planning on putting himself first?
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Energy.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. Once again, I would encourage my honourable colleagues across the way to stop misleading people with respect to the price on pollution. They need to look and read the letter that was written by 300 economists across this country that say the carbon price is the most economically efficient way to address climate in a manner that actually addresses affordability for Canadians. I would encourage them to go to talk to their friend Premier Smith, who said exactly that. Her family got more money back than they actually paid in the price on pollution. And I would encourage them, if they're concerned about the price of gas, go talk to Premier Smith and ask her to reduce it by 13 cents that she just raised it with no rebate whatsoever.
The honourable member from Central Okanagan, Similkameen, Nicola.
That rhetoric won't put money in the back pocket of British Columbians. And while the cost of this jet-setting Prime Minister summer luxury tours and vacation soars, his carbon taxes and gas taxes are driving Canadians nose first into the ground. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Canadians are struggling to afford a simple road trip. Our Conservative common sense plan to give $682 back to the people of British Columbia, will the Prime Minister agree that his carbon tax is a road trip wrecker and axe the tax on gas this summer?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I am really astonished by the gall of these Conservatives who have the temerity to talk about the road trips of regular Canadians when they racked up $426,283 of the money of Canadians traveling to their own convention. The member for Central Okanagan was one of the Conservatives who charged regular Canadians to go to his convention. That is not right, Mr. Speaker.
Do you know how much the Liberal conventions are?
The honourable member from Lac Saint Jean.
Like
Mr. Speaker,
the
Minister of Immigration has finally met with his counterparts from Quebec, the provinces and the territories, and they have finally addressed the issue of reception capacity. The solution, a working committee. A working committee to examine the distribution of asylum seekers. It doesn't seem to me that this wasn't a problem for the Minister. It seems to me that when we asked for a more equitable distribution, he told us that asylum seekers are not cattle. Are we to understand that nothing will change between now and the committee's recommendation on the ground? The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If he'd like to criticize the working committee, perhaps he should also criticize the government of Quebec because they proposed it, and with the other provinces we said yes. He wasn't at the meeting 8 days ago. We did agree in a communiqué that we work together unanimously and coordinate our efforts because we know that asylum seekers do need to be welcomed in Quebec, and we can do this in coordination with all provinces. The honourable member for Lac Saint Jean. I would ask if he invites me next time, I'll be there. Quebec is asking to be reimbursed for $1 billion for the cost of welcoming asylum seekers. Quebec is just asking the cost be shared with other provinces so that they're doing their fair share. Quebec is calling for a reduction in temporary immigration and power to approve all applicants and calling for French language requirements. And what did the immigration minister offer Quebecers after months of shirking his responsibilities? A committee. Is there even a deadline for this committee to start delivering results? The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. What we don't invite to these meetings are quarrels, Mr. Speaker. We want to work together, and our communiqué was unanimous for once with Quebec. And in terms of French training, we've set aside around $5 billion since 2015. We want to make sure once again that French is strengthened in Quebec. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. At the end of the meeting, the Minister of Immigration said that the status quo was no longer acceptable. But as we speak, it is still the status quo. Nothing has changed on the ground. And as we speak, the federal government hasn't paid Quebec back 1 cent. And Quebec still receives more than half of all asylum seekers in Canada. This committee mustn't be allowed to become a toy to buy time until the election. It needed results yesterday, and it's even more urgent today. So when are results due? The Honourable Minister of Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. Mr. Speaker, the status quo is the bloc which has done nothing for 30 years, even though we have given billions to Quebec for French training. Those are the results they've achieved.
The Honourable Member from Hastings, Lennox-Naddington.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 summers, Canadians know this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. His carbon tax has hiked up the price of everything. Canadians deserve relief, not taxes. Unlike this coalition of convenience, Conservatives have a solution. Cancel all federal tax on gas from now until Labor Day, keeping nearly $600 in the bank accounts of Ontarians to spend on basic needs and maybe even visit with family. Mr. Speaker, would it be too much to ask for the Prime Minister to lend a helping hand to Canadians and take the tax off their summer road trips?
Yeah. The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, I'm curious if the honourable members actually approach Conservative premiers across Canada who maintain their own taxes on fuel. Mr. Speaker, in particular, in the province of Alberta, Danielle Smith has increased the price of fuel by 13 cents and offers no rebate. I expect she knows very well that the majority of families receive more than they actually pay in a fuel tax, but facts don't seem to matter to a party who is committed to eroding all of the environmental protections that exist in this country and have virtually no plans to invest in the things that are going to help working-class families address the cost of living. We're in search of solutions, not fights. I wish they'd at least come armed with facts.
Danielle Smith has had,
the Honourable Member from South Shore, St. Margaret's.
Conservatives are calling on the NDP Liberals to axe the carbon tax and all federal taxes on gas from Victoria Day to Labor Day. For Nova Scotians, this represents $542 of savings per family this summer. After 9 years, we know the Prime Minister will jet off to surf in Tofino this summer at taxpayers' expenses while Nova Scotians can't afford a summer road trip.
That's right.
Will the Prime Minister do a surfing cutback to help Canadians by taking the tax off the summer road trip?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, I know the Conservatives are excited. They think they found a new bumper sticker to put. But what would they say to that family? Not only are they taking away their carbon rebate, they also would be taking away child care. They'd be taking away their dental care. They'd be taking away their diabetes medication. So what they'd say in exchange for taking all of those things away from vulnerable people is to say that a false, empty promise. And that's what we have on the other side. Empty rhetoric and really attacking vulnerable people at a time when they most need help. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to stand with those who need help.
The Honourable Member from Brandon-Souris.
Speaker, after 9 years, Canadians can't afford this NDP Liberal government's carbon tax that they just increased by 23%. That's why Conservatives announced a common sense plan to axe the carbon tax and all federal taxes on gas from Victoria Day to Labor Day.
Great idea.
It's a 35-cent per litre saving, Mr. Speaker. In Manitoba, this would represent over $600 in savings for each family during this summer. So will the Prime Minister lend a helping hand to Canadians and take the tax off their summer road trip?
The Honourable Minister for Families.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was actually just in Manitoba last week where we were announcing supports for Canadian families, Mr. Speaker. More investments in creating more childcare spaces to relieve the burden for families. These are programs that we continue to invest in. The Canada Child Benefit,
She doesn't
the
even.
dental plan, excuse me, Mr. Speaker. Investments in Canadians, well, we see the Conservatives continue
When you forget
to
your own
vote
Liberal
against,
talking
Mr.
points.
Speaker.
The honourable member from King Vaughan.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, people can't afford to live or die. Funeral costs are now out of reach for Canadians in Ontario. The increase in unclaimed bodies is 488% since 2013. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Seniors are already struggling with affordability crisis. They have built this country, and now they can't afford to bid their loved ones farewell. When will this Prime Minister show some compassion and stop the out-of-control spending so people can live and die with dignity?
The Honourable Minister for Health.
Well, Mr. Speaker, for somebody to live with dignity, they need access to dental care. For somebody to live with dignity, they need access to their diabetes medication. For somebody to live with dignity, they need access to the medicine and support and health care that we're making sure we deliver each and every day. And for the party opposite, the Conservatives, to say the solution to global inflation and the crisis that people are seeing all over the world is to slash supports to vulnerable peoples, to attack the very supports that lift them up in the darkest times that we've faced in generations, we say no. We will continue to be there for Canadians and make sure they get what they need.